Hello, and welcome back to Autistic Tidbits and Tangents. I'm Kara Dymond. I'm one of the hosts, and with me for the next little while is our special guest co-host, my dear friend Bruce Petherick. Now, I'm going to let Bruce introduce himself. You might remember him from our second podcast episode. I believe he was the guest, and he also is the composer of our theme song. But he does so many other things I'm going to let him tell you about.
Thank you so much, my dear friend Kara. My name is Bruce Petherick, as Kara said, and she said, that's terrible. My day job is I'm the autistic advocate at Autism Canada, and I'm very proud of that. And my ex-day job was touring the world playing music and doing all those creative things that musicians do. That's all. Oh, I'm also in Vancouver, British Columbia, which we call paradise.
It looks like paradise from all the pictures, let me tell you. Well, Bruce and I are going to be talking today about fun and what is fun. And maybe think about that while we roll the intro music.
Welcome to Autistic Tidbits and Tangents.
Candid conversations between autistic off-hour professionals.
Cool.
Trigger warnings for this episode include discussions of ableism, internalized ableism, and a critique of normalcy, the policing of play, and behaviorism. I'm going to begin, before we deep dive into this topic, I wanted to read an update from Maja. Now, Bruce is here filling in for Maja for a couple of months, and she wrote an update because she recently had her baby. So these are her words. I am a mother now. What a crazy thing. It's hard to know what to include in an update such as this. On the one hand, I feel it is most appropriate to give a more shallow update and simply say that my newborn and myself are both healthy and doing well. On the other hand, it feels like a lie to leave so much out. The truth is, things ended up very far from the romantic ideas portrayed in the media. Birth itself was a marathon that unfortunately ended with an acute C-section under full anesthesia. They don't tell you this, but it is very possible for the regular anesthesia to not work properly. In my case, it worked on my left side, but not my right. My baby girl was luckily healthy and strong and still is. I'm recovering well, but slowly. C-sections are hard. Who knew? Meanwhile, having a newborn is a whole new kind of life. Perhaps if I'd grown up with more babies in my close social circle, I would have known more about all of this, but I doubt anything can prepare a person for parenthood. I am up every 2 to 3 hours to feed the baby, and my brain feels more and more like it might as well be mashed potatoes. There is no describing this level of tiredness. There is a reason sleep deprivation is a form of torture, and yet because this tiny living creature depends on it, you somehow find a way to do it. From what the books say, I should expect this pattern to continue for at least the first 3 months of my child's life, and unless a full switch to formula is made, my sleep deprivation will remain. On the bright side, as my baby begins to respond more to social interaction, the joys and wonders of parenthood are probably going to kick in to a larger extent. For now, my husband and I, and the whole extended family, find her incredibly cute. Even if she has no control of her facial expressions or movements, her smile is still enough to make it all worth it for just a little while longer. By the time that magic fades, she smiles again or does something else that would not be the least bit funny or charming if she were someone else's child, but absolutely is for the mere fact that she is ours. Unfortunately, I will not likely be able to return to the podcast until there is a more connected sleep in my life, and I can't predict when that will be. In the meantime, while I miss the chats with Kara and our guests, I will have to entertain myself with the rather random and stupid lyric changes I make to silly song snippets and sing to my daughter during her waking hours. I will be back in due time, and until then, I hope you will continue to enjoy the podcast, be nice to each other in the comments section, and take good care of yourselves.
Maja, I will take care of your my temporary position here. And also, it was so lovely to hear. It's so lovely to hear a new parent like that. It's true. I haven't had a baby for 20 something years. I haven't had a baby. I haven't been. Yes. My eldest was born 23 years ago, and so it's a long time. But I do remember the sleeplessness. I do remember the physical strength that we have, and I'm talking as the father. Like what my wife was doing is an extra level above this, of course. But then that sort of that connection you make with your own child, and you and I are teachers. We connect with children, all the time. They're really super special, but there's that difference. Yeah. How sweet. Yeah.
I know, and I love it. I love that she's always so, I'm going to say Danish, but she's always so honest about not just waxing over things, but she says the good and the bad. You always get a balanced perspective with Maja, and I'm so glad that everyone is doing well. And I miss her, but I'm so glad you're here.
To bring more balance, and actually. Listeners, the tens of thousands of listeners that we have who may not know your and my history, you and I do always talk about that balance. How important it is to be honest about the negative things, but also be honest about the positive things, and specifically our autism. Because it is, we are different. We are different from this neurotypical average that doesn't exist, but there are those differences, and sometimes they're really difficult to get through. I find most of the times are positive, but there's still the negative things. Well,
I'm fighting a lot of my ADHD symptoms. I'm fighting every day at the moment while I try to write my second book, and I'm frustrated with myself, but that's an example of something where it's like, this is not adding to my life. This is actually my brain is actively fighting me all of the time. And I have to use every strategy I know, and I have to rely on many of my friends to help keep me on top of things and on track of things.
But if their brain is fighting ourselves, who's the boss? Oh, that's right, executive functioning. What we miss,
it's the worst. But I'm trying to find balance. Going back to the idea of balance, and I'm trying to have a little bit of fun. Our topic for today. Now, a few months ago, you called me. I was driving. I remember talking to you over speakerphone, and you said, "What's your idea of fun?" Do you remember that?
Actually, I think I feel this is something that you and I have talked about for maybe a couple of years.
I have time blindness sometimes, so this might have been a couple of years ago.
But it's also, I think it's becoming more and more important to me to question this, and especially to raise this as an issue. I'm going to say from an ableist point of view, actually. So actually, should we talk about what? Okay, let me tell you what my problem is.
Yes, please.
Because again, this is for our listeners. Too often, I've noticed that people have in society generalized this concept of fun, and it bugs me because I've realized that I don't understand what fun is, even for me. And it is part of this general conversation. So the example I can think of that comes to me straight away is that I was doing a gig in my ex-life as a musician, with a big band, and it was a very entertaining, everybody was having a great time sort of gig. And the leader came up to me after the gig and said, "Did you have fun?" And I went, "No." And I found out that I've never worked for that band ever again. And I met up with the leader a couple of years later, and I sort of said, like, "Why didn't I ever get to play?" He said, "Well, you didn't have fun. We don't want to have people that don't have fun."
Oh my gosh.
And then I thought, okay, and here's the problem, of course. Was I being emotionally, intellectually stimulated at the gig? Yeah, I'm a musician. Like, there's always bad things that's happening, but I was engaged. I got enjoyment. Anytime I'm performing, anytime my piano is just over here, so I'm gesturing. Anytime I'm doing that, I'm being nourished. Was I laughing and drinking and making lots of loud noises, but the rest of the band is, which was their definition of the time? No, I wasn't. And I thought, well, that's kind of a little bit unfair. But then I've noticed that in my work at Autism Canada, I had an email this last weekend from a parent saying, "How do I encourage my autistic child to have more fun?" And I do understand sort of how they're coming from, but I always want to go back and say, what is fun? What do you mean by fun? Because unlike, we use various phrases in a whole bunch of different ways, and they have general meanings. But I think fun is defined really, really super narrowly.
Yes.
And I don't think autistics fit in that, in general, in that little narrow definition.
What I wonder is the definition of fun so narrow because we have really narrowed our idea of what is normal, like normalcy, especially over the 20th century. We developed this idea of what does normal look like at work? What does normal look like in children? And it gradually became narrower and narrower so that anyone who was an outlier is seen as, broken, not good, a problem. And
another.
Yes, exactly. So I would guess that our definition of what is fun is also narrowed because we put children and people in general, but especially children, under a microscope to see, are they normal? Are they on track with everyone else? Are they doing the same things as everyone else? Are they conforming? And there's so much anxiety, I think, for parents because of so many of the blame the parent narratives that have been out there for many, 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 many decades now, that we are always looking and assuming, well, not we, but I'm making a generalization, that adults are often trying to get children to enjoy all the same things.
Noam Chomsky's manufacturing consent is in the back of my mind as you've been speaking all that way, and it's really quite politically damning that, in fact, you are talking about manufacturing consent, manufacturing this idea of normalcy. But what I find interesting about fun, and nothing that, everything you've said is I completely agree with. I think fun, no one questions fun, where I still think a lot of people will question, let's say, child development stages. Yes. We all know perfectly well that those age group development stages are guidelines. They're guidelines, and they can be out by years, and there's nothing wrong.
And fun is an even more rigid box.
Fun is rigid, and you see this on advertising. We're in the middle of a summer festival here in White Rock. We've got bands going to be playing down in the beach, and the advertising is all about come down and have fun. And the fun means being stuck with a couple of hundred people, maybe 1,000 people, yelling and screaming, and listening to really bad 80s music, or actually it's Men Without Hats is coming up. And in fact, I I have a great love for that band. I'm losing my classical credibility here, but it's like, I can't, that's not fun. That's horrifically bad.
Okay, so I do have a penchant for 80s music, but crowds, noise, people yelling, people, like tons of people around, that sounds horrific to me. That's like a hellscape for me. Yeah, fine.
It's kind of, I mean, that specific example is doubly worse. One, because this is in my local community and I can't escape the noise.
Yeah.
And you know what? Here's our balance. We're in summer, there's festivals. They're going to have loud music. They tend to finish at 10 o'clock. You know what? I can deal, let's deal with it. It's terrible, but let's deal with it for a little bit. Here's what I can't get away from, though, is I have to go to the beach to pick up my wife.
Oh. And
so the only way for her to get home from work is for me to drive down, try and find a parking spot, and we have limited parking as it is, and then walk through thousands of people trying to get to where she's working.
Yeah.
And this is the beach, my safe space.
Oh,
so my safe space is gone, and like I can't be accommodated.
Yeah, and you can't avoid it.
I can't avoid it. I can't be accommodated. All because of fun.
Yeah. No, I'm going to circle back to something that you were saying earlier about how autistics don't always, our notions of fun don't always fall in that rigid little box. And the Rolodex of memories in my brain is reminding me of all the times I would be with, I'm 12 years old with other 12-year-old girls who are all about the boy bands. And I'm like, oh, I hate this. Like, I am so not into this. I have so many moments like that in my life. I actually thought no one really enjoyed being in loud, noisy bars or like dance club settings. And I couldn't figure out why people did it. I actually thought for a long time that I don't normally wear headphones. I'm wearing them today because someone in the comments mentioned that my mic hasn't been very good. I find them painful, but I'm trying it out. So people let me know if my audio is better. But I have never worn headphones. And I thought maybe everyone else is just blowing their eardrums over, because I would see everyone else listening to their Walkman and then later their like MP3 players or their phones. And so I thought, okay, maybe my hearing is just a lot better than other people's. And that's why I don't enjoy it. Like, I kept trying to like come up with a rationale how people would be putting themselves through these horrific experiences for me. But no, people do enjoy those things. People find that fun, and I don't.
One of the things that always amazes me from an advocacy point of view, very often when I'm doing presentations, I talk about my oral hyperacuity. And so therefore, the music that calms me down when I need to be calming down when I'm not performing is like actually the music I compose, soft, spacey music. But so many autistics are really into heavy metal or death metal, like so many. And I don't understand that. It's not a judgment point of view, but it's just like, that's just, I don't know. And I talked to a couple of people about it, and they said it's the familiarity of it is one thing. And also heavy metal blocks everything else out, and death metal. And so they get it to, it's not quite at pain level, but nothing else is coming through. And it's like, okay, that is still sounds like torture for me, but I sort of more understand that. And I was going to say, your comment about not wearing the headphones is like you're trying to. This is self-ableism, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're trying to think there's something wrong with me. There's something different about me that I need to fix, rather than it's actually everybody else that it's not right. A person who's very, 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 very close to me, who maybe I live with, talks about sometimes wanting to go out going dancing. And she was a dancer when she was younger. And like, yeah. But she can hardly get through social situations because the sound's overwhelming. I was like, why did you put yourself through that sensory overload to get into the dancing aspect? Which, I mean, I can understand that. And I think it's what's the word I'm looking for? When you're following what everybody else is doing.
Going along with the crowd. Yeah.
It's going along the crowd. And this again comes back to what's wrong with the fun, is that advertising will tell us this is going to be fun, and everyone goes, oh, that's fun, so I need to do it. So everybody, I don't want to say turns into sheep, but they conform to this definition, and it seems like nobody questions. And I wonder at the core of my being, how many people question what fun is?
Probably not a lot of people. Now, can I ask you what is fun for you? I know it's a hard question, but I assume you've been thinking about it. So what do you find fun?
To be honest, I don't want to answer the question, because I think the answer is it's defined so badly, so narrowly, that nothing is fun. However,
oh, interesting.
And actually, I think that's an honest answer. I don't find anything that's fun. I love reading. My safe space is playing the piano. 99.999% of the time, anytime I'm with my wife is an incredibly positive experience. You know, sometimes we have to go to bank, and sometimes we have to go things that are not so interesting to me, but being with my wife is just like, I adore it. I adore her. Being with you, listeners, you won't believe what Kara and I do for fun. We sit in a room and read at each other.
It is true. We have done that.
Yeah, we parallel play read.
We do.
And it's funny. It's how my wife and I often we're in bed about to watch television to go to sleep, but we're on our phones, and we are very conscious of each other, and we'll be sharing little stories from Facebook or Instagram or something. But it's also like, it is parallel play. Yeah. I'm a little too old now, but I used to really, really, really look forward to playing soccer.
Okay.
And I get a lot of aesthetic pleasure from soccer, and I was really good at it when I was younger and all that sort of stuff. But am I having fun compared to everybody else? I don't think so.
But I don't think fun has to be comparative.
But what is it? And we can get to the language problem of everything is a binary negation. You know, everything is defined by what it's not. And I would like to bring that phrase up about something else a little bit later, which is tied in to what we're talking about. You go ahead. Like how do you define? What's your fun?
So some of the activities you just described, like reading, writing, for me, I would call enjoyable, but not necessarily fun. When it's fun for me, often there is some level of interaction. That parallel play is fun to me, where you are sharing ideas with somebody. Often, like for me, there usually has to be intellectual stimulation. It has to be an experience where I'm learning something, because for me, I'm a curious person. Learning is fun when it's something that is interesting to me. So I'll give you a recent example. You won't be surprised by Bruce. But I went on vacation with my boyfriend, and our vacation was actually a paleontological tour, and we got to dig for dinosaur bones. And to me, that was so much fun. And we got to clean dinosaur bones in the lab. And
I have to comment. I have to comment here that I've mentioned where you went to many people, many, 10 people maybe, over the last couple of weeks, universally, they all went, that is so cool.
Yes.
And it's
yes,
like,
it was. Now, I have to ask, were those people autistic?
uh-huh.
Okay, because so my boyfriend's family, they live in another country, and so he Zooms with them, and so he was telling them about our trip, and they said, now, did Kara enjoy this as well? Like, assuming that I would not be having fun, and it was more his thing. And like, one of the many reasons I love him is we share fascinations and passions and derive the same amount of pleasure from activities like that. But there was this assumption that I would not find that fun. Isn't that interesting?
And so what you've just said and what I've just said does not roll into going to see a 80s band at the beach.
Yeah.
Like,
yes.
That aspect of this group fun, none of that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And doing this podcast is fun because I enjoy having conversations and learning from other people and exchanging ideas. There are aspects of it that I do not find fun. I don't enjoy editing it. I don't really watch the whole thing back. I just kind of trim the beginning and end and, put it with the soundtrack. Okay,
but we're fine in the middle.
I hate that stuff, but yeah.
So, and here's that question about what fun is. It as an endorphins. Just 20 minutes before you and I started talking, I got off a call with a client. Part of my job is part of my job at Autism Canada is that we get questions about resources across the country, and we can tell people this is for your province, this is what can happen, and we can do this, we can do that. Sometimes it gets to a little more individual, and I had an hour conversation with an autistic person going through a burnout, and they were good enough to have a support person with them. So for an hour, we just talked through their burnout. Now, I got off the call and I felt so good. I felt that I had helped them so much. They got listened to, they were acknowledged, they were verified, they were all that sort of stuff. I gave them some resources. I shared how I felt with a fellow team member who originally gave me the client's information. Like, it was a fantastic feeling.
Yes, of
course. Is that fun? And you know what? If we sort of talk about, if I think about the reading and the playing music and, parallel play with you and my wife, I'm getting the same feeling as just getting off a call with a client like that. That was super positive. Does that fit community's idea of what fun is?
Well, I mean, it definitely released some dopamine. You got sort of a reward from the work that you did. It released oxytocin because anytime you build trust, when someone trusts you, you get a rush of oxytocin. But is that fun? Are neurotransmitters that are released what makes something fun? We could use a psychologist right now.
We could, well, but we also could get really super functional and like, is everything just chemistry? And much as I am somebody who likes knowing systems at a depth, I still love the magic. And so I'm never going to get to, it's not just brain chemistry.
Yeah.
But, it is an interesting perspective to think about in our definitions that is part of it.
Yeah. And are solitary activities fun? I have to think about that, or just enjoyable. I don't know. Like, if I were to create a definition, would fun need to include other people? I don't think so.
Again, this is where I'd say I don't know what fun is, because a lot of solitary activities. I love playing solo games. Mm-hmm. I like playing board games with other people as well. But like, that's very enjoyable for me. It's very intellectually stimulating. It's very calming. Yeah. Is it fun? Games are supposed to be fun.
And I mean, singing jazz for me is very fun. Whether there are other people around or not, I enjoy it immensely. I enjoy the creativity that, yeah, like you're always thinking and inventing, and there's such freedom to it. The freedom of creativity is fun.
So let's just assume that you know somebody with maybe a huge amount of experience in that genre. Let's just say, we just randomly.
Hypothetically.
Hypothetically. Do you think listeners get sarcasm? It's interesting. I've been in situations playing with less experienced jazz musicians, and I can tell you I'm not having fun.
Okay.
I am fully on professionally. So there is I'm creating music. So there's a big level of enjoyment, no doubt. But when I'm playing with less experienced people, there's a lot more. I'm being totally supportive. Mm-hmm. And so I'm having to be thinking about all the time, how can I make them more comfortable? And it's a really super important, still is a super important part of my musical life, is how do I make the other person feel comfortable? That's work.
Yeah.
And even if I'm on stage and I could be like, you do that little dance that I do when I'm on the piano, I think externally it looks like fun. I'm not having fun then. Mm-hmm. And so that again is this, and I recognize I'm coming from a very privileged background with this example, but here's another problem with that fun is that those common things that are supposed to be fun sometimes are not fun when you're in the middle of them, especially if you have experience in them.
Yeah. Now, question for you though. So both mm-hmm. of your examples included an audience or someone else. When you play on your own, is it fun? Or can it be?
Oh, it's incredibly enjoyable. And like, safe space. If anything's fun for me. Okay, I was going to say if anything's fun for me, it's sitting down playing the piano. But the truth is, it's much more transcendental than that. And yes. So it's like there is this bad, boring, then work, grading papers, mm-hmm. teaching, whatever those things. There's things that we can do from a professional level. But then there's kind of, I think where you and I regularly are, is that, in your job as a teacher, my job now, helping people, most of the time that's easy and enjoyable and stimulating. And I've got professional experience. Yeah. Okay. Then it's like fun. I think it goes for me, the enjoyable, I just miss fun and go into the absolute transcendental joy of playing music for myself. And it's not fun. It's way better than that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And like, do you have that transcendental experience?
So again, with things like singing jazz being one of them, probably writing poetry, being out in nature are extreme experiences of joy for me. I would say singing jazz is less enjoyable for me when I'm performing, though I do like performing, but I think an audience or having things that are for other people's consumption adds a layer of self-consciousness. Yep. So that I don't enjoy it as freely as I would were other people not around for those experiences, for those creative things. But I would definitely say that I can experience profound joy in some of those things when I am alone, no one else is around.
The nature's interesting because, again, that's actually nature's really interesting because I think a lot of people experience that calmness or that joy from being in nature But I do wonder how many people think that's fun. And here we go. Let's roll this back into autism. Like, what I think is the joy about this discussion for you and I that we've had for the last couple of years, and hopefully this isn't engendering things for listeners, is that as autistics, we tend to question these fundamental things all the time because we don't have them innate. So this a cognitive effort all the time about these about what is going on. It's like questioning fun at this level.
But this is also really fun. This to me is fun because we are deeply thinking and questioning things. I love that.
Have we just destroyed ourselves in a self-cyclical argument? There is no fun except this is fun. You know what fun is? It's defining what fun. Well, no, okay. So the point I was going for was that we do, like, this is one of our skills, is questioning these assumptions. And I love challenging people, society, on these assumptions. And not this one's a big one for me because I think it's so used and it's so narrow, but it's also worth us sitting on the outside for a whole bunch of things and questioning, what do you really mean by that? It's part of inclusion. It's part of it's a part of our role as autistic adults is to question those societal norms and question, are you being non-inclusive?
Well, and policing play is a whole industry.
And are we going to put the little link that you sent to me in the show notes, the Google one?
Yes. So our thing of the day is an article. I'll just briefly talk about it, and then we can talk a bit more about it. We knew we were having this discussion, so I was just Googling what is fun. And one of the first things that came up was a short article by Dr. Michael Rucker, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He researches the science of fun, and he wrote a whole thing about, like, what is fun? What's called What is Fun Anyway? And he gave some standard definitions, but he pointed out a lot of the the assumptions or the things that we aren't thinking about. So there is potentially a relationship between fun and play, but not necessarily. Are they always together? Can they be separate things? Another aspect of fun is flow. A lot of us enjoy being in flow states. He goes through, I think you know what I mean by that as well. He goes through how certain things are fun sometimes and not fun at other times. So for instance, going shopping for fun can be fun for some people, but it can also be utilitarian and less fun. So, and you might have that experience in some situations, but not. It might be related to freedom, fantasy fulfillment, escapism, that idea that time flies when you're having fun, and the flow state. I'm just going through some of the points of the article. And can you ever universally define fun? And some people find work fun, but does work cease to be work if we have fun? There's lots of questions around this. And gamification is a thing in education and in other things where we're trying to make things more fun to get more investment and engagement. And of course, it all comes down to perception, and it's a subjective construct at the end of the day.
So, do you have fun teaching?
Sometimes there are many times that I'm having fun with students. It's actually usually when I have thrown a lesson out the window and we're just doing some activity that emerged naturally, and I'm also feeling really proud of them and enjoying watching them engage and them think very critically and challenge my thinking. That to me is fun.
Again, coming back to your intellectual stimulation is really important.
For me, that's a huge aspect of fun. Yeah.
It's weird in the article, and we're already talking about it. I don't know if you're going to edit this around, or I don't know how to get
I don't do
around this.
editing in the middle. We're just
Okay.
powering through.
We're going for it. Okay. Why is there a difference between work and fun? And again, you and I, again, we've talked about this a little bit, but it's like you and I don't think of our 9 to 5, Monday to Friday job as work all the time. It's just what we do. And even more for me as a musician, like being a musician is like the best job in the world. It's terribly, it's got a whole bunch of problems when it comes to things like you don't get holiday pay, and I learned what lunchtime was and all that sort of stuff. But it's like, it's ridiculously wonderful. And to call that work in the way it's defined is just silly. But even the job I do now, and I think when I'm teaching, that it's not work in that normal way. I have to go to the office at 9 o'clock this morning. Like, I never felt that. Oh, I'm sorry. I did feel that because getting up early in the morning is horrible. And getting up in the morning when it's cold and snowy is terrible. No one likes that. But once I'm there, we're teaching at school. Sometimes getting to school at 7 o'clock for choir rehearsal is like, oh my, that's no one wants to do this. Everybody's grumpy and it's cold and wet and slow and slushy and things. I get into the building and waiting for the kids to turn up. Cool. No problem. No problem whatsoever. The thing about time, you lose sense of time when you're having fun. Do you have a sense of time anyway?
Yes and no. It's very hit or miss. When I am doing an activity I enjoy, whether or not we can define it as fun, I don't know. When I'm doing something that I enjoy, I can hyper-focus. I can do it for hours and hours and hours, and lose track of the time that is passing. And I do not want to stop. But I do think otherwise I have a pretty good time gauge. I'm good at estimating how long things will take. I'm good at planning, lessons and PowerPoints and things like that. I can usually tell you within about half an hour what time of day it is without looking at a clock. As long as I haven't hyper-focused, because if I hyper-focused, I will lose track.
Right now, my cognitive brain is aware of approximately the time it is because you and I decided we're going to do this at X time. If I look out the window, I have no idea what time it is. It's not night.
Yeah.
And I've only lived here for a year, so there's still that little shift of 20 years in Alberta has taught my body and brain what time should look like at a certain time of year. And of course, moving from Australia, the days are much shorter, or there's less variance in the days because it's closer to the equator, where I was living. And so that would have it was easier to tell the time of day, I think, in Melbourne than it is here. But so I can't tell you the time of day approximately. I'm terrible at judging when 5 minutes has passed.
Okay.
Or half an hour.
Yeah.
And so constantly I'm looking at my clock because I think I don't have a good sense of time.
I mean, there are times I don't like. So I would usually ask Maya to be timekeeper during the podcast, but that's mostly so I don't have to keep looking at what the time is and worrying about it. Do you know what I mean? But I would say overall, if I am not hyper-focusing, my time estimation is very good. I usually know how long it'll take me to get ready, how long it'll take me to get places. I'm pretty good at those things.
So it's interesting because so often that and I forget what the actual scientific term is, where you don't have a good sense of time.
Time blindness.
Common it is.
So I have
time blindness. Thank you.
I have some aspects of it. I did refer to it earlier, but like other times, so it works in some situations and sometimes not for me.
So I wonder if that's a common, actually, now I'm thinking about it, maybe this is a typical with diagnosis, is that
it's a big thing with executive functioning issues, right?
Yeah.
So ADHD, there's a lot of time blindness in, and I think it does relate to flow states. I think it also relates to how painful it can feel to be bored, and that can stretch out the experience of time. But I do want to, I want to get back to something I was thinking when you were speaking. And, the flip side of, the assumption of what is fun, is there a universal definition of what fun is? There's also this assumption that work is meant to be experienced as something negative or boring, right? That work cannot be fun, that work and fun are not mutually, are mutually exclusive. And where do we get that from? I mean, we get that from education and being told school is not supposed to be fun. And that is a widely accepted belief, but does it have to be that way?
Can I say neoliberalism now? I actually, you and I will always bring up neoliberalism. It's interesting. It's an interesting point. As I was growing up, there was a movement in Australia, and I think it's relatively across the world. This starts in the 60s, and I'm not to say I was growing up in the 60s, but I was, about the reduction of work hours and the importance of non-work hours was becoming, because of technological advances, that we didn't need to work 40 hours a week anymore. We only needed to work 20 hours a week, let's say. And that the idea of having time outside work became more and more and more important. And I think I felt that, let's say, becoming more conscious in the 70s and certainly early 80s, that I think there was a feeling that a lot of people didn't have that old idea, which actually is Scottish Presbyterianism, of work being this bad thing. Mm-hmm. Like, you're supposed to be, it's a terrible experience because it's good for you. That sort of negative reinforcement. Did I just say negative reinforcement? I didn't say that, listeners. Ignore that. And I think there was this movement in the 70s of work being, your leisure time was becoming more important.
Yes.
And then I honestly do think rise of neoliberalism in the 80s did start bringing that all back. And you get that idea of working 80 hours a week was great. Yeah. And that being celebrated. And of course, the beauty of COVID is that destroyed that yet again. And we now have a whole bunch of people who are waking up to the work's not that important anymore.
Mm-hmm. And that idea, the counter movement of balance, going back to balance.
Oh, balance. Here we go.
Yeah, there we go. Full circle. But that also made me think of the work of Elfie Cohn and how, we assume when a child at school doesn't want to do something or isn't doing something they're supposed to be doing, so some task that you've given them, that they need motivation. They need motivation. And instead of looking at what is wrong with the task, right? It's the same thing. We've internalized this idea that
what is wrong with the task?
School is not supposed to be fun. So this is a normal, so-called normal experience to dislike doing something, and all you need is us to reward you or punish you into complying with the task.
And also questioning, is it necessary?
Well, that's the thing. We don't think about,
this is something I've come
is it necessary? Is it valuable? Is it relevant?
Yeah.
Right?
As parents, we have my youngest is in first years of high school and was struggling academically. And I'm putting those in huge inverted commas because we know exactly struggling academically, what does that really mean? He was not having a good time at school. That was the most important thing for this discussion. And moving provinces into a new system, he suddenly blossomed and started being really involved positively in a whole bunch of subject areas. He learned, sorry, I'm using they is the pronoun. They learned woodworking, and it's something that that's nothing in my mind has got anything to do with woodworking. And my wife's, so it's like this popped up for them. I'm still learning about woodworking. Great, fantastic. They got into music without me being involved, and it's actually super passionate about music and really enjoying it. And this is fantastic. I completely bombed mathematics.
Yeah.
And both of us as parents went, okay, so what sort of support do we need, and what do we need to help them through the system? And they even went to a kind of lower, I'm going to say it rudely, like maths for dummies level, something to get basic numeracy and things. And it really challenged me because maths is so important for me, and it's really important to have maths, but it's like I got to think about this. They are just not good at math, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. And why do we have a system where we expect everyone to be good at everything? Neoliberalism.
Well, and
competition, weeding people out. Yeah.
I've just finished a book about average. Ooh. And about the whole system, the whole education system in America being trying to weed out the average and only to be teaching towards the advanced, and the expectation is everyone was really good at everything. And it's funny. I think you and I know you have one subject you struggle with. Like high school was easy for me, and I was really good at a whole bunch of things academically. But if it was cooking, woodwork, swimming, I'm just trying to think things I'm bad at, I would have struggled. Yes. Like completely. And yet those life skills, I mean, fundamentally, learning to swim and being able to cook probably is better for the general population than me doing grade 12 physics, because I've never, it's just an interest area, but I was never going to be a physicist. So why is physics so important?
Yeah.
And quite honestly, much as I love calculus.
Yeah. Have you used it?
Calculus.
Yeah.
Well, I do, because you can use it for filter design in electronic music, and I've used advanced mathematics in certain aspects of composition. I've used it for sound generation. Yes, I have, but other than engineers and physicists, like nobody else uses calculus.
Yeah.
And why is this set of subjects? Historically, I know, but why are we still living in this? And all of this is to say, I still have that prejudice that
yes,
my youngest needed to continue to do mathematics. And it's like, you know what? No, they need to have basic numeracy.
And how different is that than my child needs to play? We have these ideas of, again, it goes back to ideas of normalcy, right?
Mm.
And that's okay. Everyone has them, and it's about challenging them and questioning them and, letting children find what actually engages them and gets them curious, and you are doing that. So don't beat yourself up for that question that I turned on you there.
I'm going to beat myself up only just because it's the challenge of the assumption, which is always good. It's always good. I mean, I really do like knowing when I'm wrong, learning when I'm wrong. In fact, I get an email today at work about a training session I did, and it's 25 lines of positive comments. Okay, I'm good. Yeah. I do want to go back to them and say what was wrong.
Yes.
Because it's like I'm not learning anything. Like, I appreciate the positive comments, and there is that, okay, there is a little bit of the stroking the ego, but I don't need that particularly. My ego is big enough as it is. What I do need to know is what was wrong. What could I have done better? Because we only learn from the negative.
Yeah.
We don't need praise. Oh, there's Alfie again. Oh.
It is Alfie gone.
And it's not to say we don't need the praise. Because we need the intrinsic praise. We need to.
We need to know
perspective,
ourselves that we've done something well. Yeah.
And if we are in a teaching situation, we need to make sure that we're praising an honest, good job, an honest, good effort,
and giving specifics.
Yeah, like definitely. But we learn from the negative, not the positive.
I would actually reframe that as we learn from information that is instructive, because it's not negative to receive feedback. And that's another assumption that people often have, and that students often have, that I spend so much time countering, that like feedback is information to help you grow. It's not critical. It's not meant to be evaluative. It's information that you can apply so that what you are doing, like you have a richer learning experience. Your brain grows extra neurons, So I would say criticism, constructive criticism. I don't love the term, but sorry, that's another tangent there.
And perhaps I was being a little inaccurate with my language use. In fact, what I meant was the education comes
from the learning. Yeah.
From what I was going to say, from the negative feedback, from the feedback of error, from the constructive criticism. A better way of saying that.
From things you haven't considered yet.
Well,
yeah.
I've always told my kids to ask the teacher not to tick what they got right.
Yeah.
And just concentrate what they got. And I'm thinking very specifically in math questions.
Yes.
But like a list of science facts. Yeah. Like, don't tell me what I got right.
Yeah.
Tell me, or the assumption, of course, is that there's no Mike, you got it right. But concentrate on the gaps, concentrating on where I have missed something, concentrate on where something could have been phrased better, something, those sort of things.
Instructive feedback. What I would say though is, especially for neurodivergent people, we have a very strong negativity bias, right? So we do still sometimes need people to appreciate what we bring to the table.
Yeah. I think that's always going to be a failing. It's a failing for me from a teaching perspective, that I don't remember that enough, but I'm also aware of it enough to tell people that praise is actually relatively rare for me in a teaching situation. And also, quite honestly, if I'm not saying anything, everything's fine. Everything's good. But still, I do need to be reminded. The negativity bias is something that I do forget. Yeah. Can I reframe something just for a second?
Of course.
There was another phrase, not a word this time, that I have a problem with in the same way as fun.
Okay.
And I don't know if we've been going for a while.
We should wrap it up soon, but finish this thought.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can talk about this next time. Is that I've also come across the problem with the phrase mental health. And what does that mean?
Again, because it's vague?
Because it's really vague. And fun is annoying to me. Like, the use of fun is annoying in a sense because it's used in advertising. Yeah. Mental health is super important for us as autistics.
Well, and just the term assumes that there is one state of mental health to aspire to. Oh, Bruce, you've just blown my mind.
No, I'm sorry.
No, that's a great thing. I appreciate the stretching, the mental stretching I get to do when we have conversations.
Well, perhaps we can talk about this next time, and maybe the things things that I was considering is that mental health. Where does mental health and autism intersect? Mm-hmm. Because, and I'm thinking of support services specifically, because there are times that autistics have, by the way I'm thinking about it, have some mental health challenges. But also a lot of things that are defined as mental health challenges, and I'm going to say anxiety straight away, are actually more to do with our presentation of autism than a mental health problem.
Which is why so many late diagnosed autistic people have like untreatable anxiety or depression, because they're trying to treat it as like a neurochemical thing, as opposed to this is sort of a systemic issue of existing in a world that is not accommodating for you, and you don't know yourself that you need to be accommodated.
So
yes, that is another topic.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, we'll have that as a preview. Okay, so just one last thing, I guess, before we wrap up. You were telling me something before I started recording, and I want to hear a little bit more about one of your passions, which is Godzilla. So why is Godzilla meaningful for you? And yeah, give me a spiel about Godzilla.
Okay. So I've always been fascinated by Japanese culture, and I recognize it's from an Orientalist perspective. In other words, I'm looking at it as an other from my culture, my kind of white European culture. I've transcended that more now by being really understanding what a lot of these things that fascinate me about Japanese culture. And one of the early examples for me was watching the original Godzilla on Saturday afternoon, black and white television, on holidays. Usually it was a summer thing that you got to see, and I got to see, from my memory, the original Japanese version, not the American version. And it was this theme of my young childhood of having this show and thinking, oh, it's a monster movie, and I'm not really into monster movies. I'm into horror, yeah. And then approaching it again about 20 years ago and recognizing that Godzilla was an anti-atomic bomb image. And then I started thinking very much about oppression of the Japanese, the Japanese culture of the 1950s, on how it had moved from this very imperialistic, and they did, the culture itself, the country did some bad things, really, really bad things, early part of the 20th century. But in the 1950s, they were dominated by the Americans for whatever reason. And these little counterculture movements, of which Godzilla is one of them, it's a Japanese film. There's no other, as much as we can generalize about any sort of aspect of culture, but it is such a Japanese film. But it's got a whole bunch of anti-American stuff without being imperialist again. I talk about. And then so much work has been done on Godzilla and such an image, but now that image really is on a silly monster movie, not an anti-nuclear power or nuclear bomb film.
Yes.
And how that's now morphed into this silliness. And I think especially in North America, where the political reasons of its creation have been missing, and it's kind of like fascination of looking at the Brothers Grimm fairy tales,
Yes.
and knowing some of the stories about what these songs and things were, and how they're reflections of pretty terrible things, and yet we sing them as children's songs. Yeah, so Godzilla became this example for me of some of my love of the Japanese culture, but also of the anti-culture or subversive culture that we all find in a whole bunch of different ways. And look, in Canada, we have, I think there are many humorists who are culture subverting.
Yes.
And I love that about our culture now. Yeah. So the good thing about Godzilla being an interest is that, you can just sit there and watch old movies.
This is really connecting everything we've talked about. So whether or not you consider it fun or just enjoyable, but even enjoyment has that deconstructing assumptions, thinking really deeply and critically about things, and that intellectual stimulation. So thank you, Bruce.
And I don't think, I think that people watching Godzilla with me don't have fun, because I'm pointing out.
You're bringing it down here.
Oh yeah, I'm deconstructing it, decentering it, the process all the time.
But you have fun, so that's what matters.
Yeah.
We're not policing fun today.
I have. Good.
Well, Bruce, we should probably wrap this up here, but I'm so delighted that we had this conversation today, and I'm really
had fun.
Looking forward. I had so much fun, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation and some of the ones coming up.
Me too. Thank you so much. It's always
You're
a pleasure.
welcome. Thank you, and thank you, viewers. We will see you soon. Take care of yourselves, and we'll talk soon. Autistic Tidbits and Tangents.